I'm here because you felt the need to address this issue publicly. So what I want to ask you about is why did you feel the need to address it publicly, and what do you hope to accomplish by that?
Well, I want to calm the public down. I want to calm Washingtonians down. What happened in Minnesota happened in Minnesota. So don't conflate what happened there with what's happening in Washington State. We audit. We did 3,000 audits last year. And there's a lot of jumping to conclusions by some of the rhetoric that's been out on the social media. And I think it's important for the public to know the facts, because that's what we do in the State Auditor's Office. We're fact-driven. And what we do is we spend a lot of time and energy doing a multitude of audits. Every government in Washington State is audited. And like I said, we did 3,000 last year. We have no evidence at this time or active fraud investigations in DCYF. I think that's important for the public to know.
Well, and I also think it's important to hear from the state.
Oh, absolutely.
And you know, we've reached out to DCYF, we've reached out to DSHS, and we said, just talk to us. Let's sit down and talk. And they haven't. We've just gotten some emails. So it's so helpful to hear from you.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad to know that. We want to be your trusted source. We are your trusted source in the State Auditor's Office. When I say we are your, meaning the Washingtonians in Washington State. And we take fraud very seriously. Let's make sure that you know that. That's our job. We take accountability very seriously. And we report what we find. So if you go out to our website, and I know people don't like to go out to websites, but we've worked very hard to make that website user-friendly. And we've taken the largest audit we do in the state of Washington, which we call the single wide audit for the state of Washington, and it is the largest that we do, and it is a 1,300-page document. Nobody's going to be able to read through a 1,300-page document. So we have created some infographics that explain it so that the public would know, so they're informed, so they're educated, so they know what are we doing in the State Auditor's Office with regards to auditing government, whether it's a state agency or a local government. And we do them all, from a mosquito district in eastern Washington to the city of Seattle to DSHS to the smallest commission in the state agency. So we do it all.
Do you understand why people want to hear from the state with regard to this? I know you had said right out of the gate, look, we don't have any evidence of fraud, but there are questions that have been raised not only on a local level, but at a federal level as well. So do you get why people are saying, I want to hear from my state, and if you do, you know, why do you understand it or not?
Well, I think what's good is it brings clarity. I'm glad that people are looking at how their agencies are functioning here in Washington State, and we provide a plethora of information on our website. Every report that we do is on our website. You can go back and look at, since the onset of DCYF, the Department of Children and Youth Families, you can see every report that we've done, and you can read through those reports, and you can understand that they are audited. And we have expressed concerns over the past with some of the things that we've found that DCYF was not doing. But there's some good news here, and I think it's important to know what that good news is. With the new administration, and I'm talking about the new secretary at DSHS, Tana Sen, and the governor of the state of Washington, in his efforts on accountability for his state agencies, we're seeing a change. And if we have not been able to get to the child level in DCYF for the last 4 years, but we did last year. We have right now that we've been able to get to that, and I credit the new leadership at DCYF.
Okay,
so there's a commitment.
So just to be clear, what I'm hearing is we're not just looking at DCYF systemically, we're also looking at individual providers.
We will look at individual providers when we do those audits, but we have to get that information from the agency to be able to do that body of work, and we haven't been able to get that information for the last 4 years. So this is a new day for DCYF That's not to say that there may be issues in in the final report, but we have not seen any evidence of fraud. So they need to know that. So don't jump to that conclusion. Are there some internal controls that we're going to talk about in our audit? Most likely, that we need to have verification. Again, our motto is trust but verify. So that's what we need to do. We can't just assume something is the case. We have to do that heavy work, and we have a number of our auditors in there right now doing that work, and we're going to come out with a report in a couple months that will report on DCYF and this particular grant program. Remember, it's a very complex department because they have a foster program,
Right.
they have a juvenile rehabilitation program, they have this child care program. So it's very complex, but we are auditing all of those at some point.
And the
every
one
year.
that we're talking about, though, now is the Child
Is the
Care
Child
Fund.
Care Fund.
Development Fund, right?
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. I want to go back to individual providers versus DCYF oversight in general. You're saying that over the last 4 years, you're not able to get information from DCYF on those providers to actually do a deep dive on that as part of the audit, but you're doing that now?
Not down to the child level. And they had brought in some new software that was combining their resources. And for us to do audit work, to look at the financial, follow the dollars, follow the money, we need to follow it down to the child level, which is how you do the verification that the people are qualified to be able to get those funds. That's what we're looking at. If we found any fraud, or if anybody declared that there was fraud, that they experienced fraud with a particular provider, we would probably forward it to the fraud group out at DSHS, has a fraud and accountability. So they do the criminal work, we do the civil work. Did they cross all the T's? Did they dot all the I's? Are they financially connecting who should get that money and how it was received?
Is that something that you had raised a red flag about in terms of
Yes,
we
we have.
can't drill down, and so under the Inslee administration you weren't able to drill down to get that information, but now under the Ferguson administration you can. Is that right?
Yes, that's a true statement. Now, I will say during that time period, there was COVID during that time period, but I think the new leadership at DCYF is really committed because I've met with her about a commitment to reducing the number of findings, to being able for us to do the work that we need to do to get that verification.
Okay. So it sounds like to me that systemically the audits have, or there's been this sort of, the past audits have included sort of looking at the systems of DCYF, but not the individual child care providers. So what that says to me is then we don't really know, we don't have any information on whether or not that money is flowing properly, and is that correct?
Well, I think, I believe the DCYF can speak to that, but I can speak only to what we do in the state auditor's office. And we're financial auditors for the most part. We're looking at following the money, which is what the public's interested in. Did the money go to people that were qualified to receive the money, to families that were qualified to receive the money, and down to the child level? And we need that kind of detail to be able to verify. So again, we want to give you accurate information, you, the public, accurate information. And so we do that by doing the hard work of really drilling down that far.
We did a report just last week that looked at overpayments to providers that DCYF provided for us, and they work in conjunction with DSHS to come up with that data. So and they revealed that there were $2 million plus in overpayments in fiscal year 2025.
And that's what they should be doing. That's the role that they should be doing. It's because you have to understand these are systems. These are systems, and there are other entities like the AG's office as well. So if we know that there's fraud with what we would call a subrecipient or a vendor or something like that, we would give that criminal work over to the appropriate fraud investigators.
So I'm curious, is that overpayment data, is that something that's part of the audit that your investigators will look at and review as part of the audit process?
I'm not sure of that answer. I don't know if that particular incident would be one that would be in the 2025 audit. It very well may be, but you know, we have looked at this program, and we are, like I said, currently going to be opining on this particular program in a couple months.
I'm going to ask you just to indulge me because you're going to repeat yourself, but it's for my purposes. It's just with regard to the providers and the overall system, sort of, if you would, just describe for me or just explain to me like the difference between prior audits and the current audit. There's something new that's happening. So kind of just point out the difference to me between prior to now involving the providers. Yeah.
Well, when DCYF was first created, this is a relatively new department, right? I think it was 2017 that it was created, and in 2018-19 we did an accountability audit, which is to see whether they were following the rules and procedures, and we expressed some concerns with regards to what DCYF needed to do to improve their procedures and their policies. After that, I believe it's my understanding that DCYF went with a new accounting system. That new accounting system didn't allow us to drill down to the child, so therefore we could not actually complete an audit for DCYF during that time period. Now, with working with the new director and the governor's staff, we are in there, we are doing that work, and I think that's a good news story for the public to know, and everyone's committed to that.
Should we have been doing it prior, though, as a state?
Well, you know, we were in there doing accountability audits, but we weren't able to do the financial audit that is as critically important as well, as to follow the money. So we can audit them on whether their policies and procedures were met the requirements of the federal grant. And then what happens is DCYF and any agency in the state or any local government, if they receive federal dollars, will have to report a correction plan to that, and they provide that to the grantor, and they provide to the state legislature a corrective plan, and it's up to the grantor to determine whether they've met the requirements for that grant or not. So it's complex, and so it's not easy to be able to explain this in you know, a 2-sentence issue. But if you allow us to show you a clip of how the citizens could go out and look at these infographics, it will give a lot of good information.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. And I think that when we wrap up, what I can do is make sure we can
view it.
View it, and
yeah, and we'll give you some. I think Adam can give you some links to that.
That would be great. So, based on the work so far, do you see any gaps in oversight?
Based on the work so far, I'm seeing that we're doing our job, that we are looking at what we're supposed to be looking at, which we're validating and verifying whether they met the requirements of these federal dollars. And that's an important component of what we're doing with DCYF.
Seeing any red flags at this point?
At this point, we don't see any evidence of fraud. If that's your red flag, is meaning that it's fraud. We don't see any evidence of fraud at this point. And we have no current fraud actions that we're working on at DCYF. So that's important to note. So whatever you read on the internet that may be fomenting some concerns about fraud, we are not seeing that in the state auditor's office at this stage of the game.
And then just to clarify for people wondering about this audit, and I know the answer to this question, but I want you to answer it for me and for our viewers. What came first, sort of the chicken or the egg here? Did the audit come prior to the allegations that started in Minneapolis and then spread across the country, or did the audit come before?
Oh no, the audit came before. We're on a schedule of how we do our audits. So did we start an audit after the issue happened in Minneapolis? Is that your question?
Yep.
No. we've been working on this audit for a number of months right now. That's the work that we do. And so this issue that happened in Minnesota came during the time period we have been working on doing our audit work with DCYF.
So it's a statewide audit. You'll release the findings likely sometime in March. Is there any inclination to release that sooner because of the public interest, or release maybe a preliminary report on the findings?
At this stage, no. We're very close to coming to finishing the audit, but it's incumbent upon us to do the hard work of making sure that we have completed the body of work. Preliminarily, you may not know all the facts. And again, I think it's important to note that we are fact-based. We believe in transparency, accountability. We believe in an objective, independent review and examination, and we need to do that work and complete that work before we would opine on what the results were.
What do you think the families that rely on child care providers in our state need to know about ensuring that the dollars are going where they're supposed to?
Well, I will tell you, I have 4 adult children that are married. I have 11 grandchildren. Mm-hmm. They have all been in child care at some point. They've had afternoon care as they've aged out of like child care facilities. So it's incumbent upon parents and families to be able to ensure that they are getting the services that they are paying for or they're getting subsidized for. And I think it's incumbent upon everyone. We're communities of people, and we should be making sure that the very most important people in our lives, our children, are being cared for appropriately and correctly.
And what would you say to folks who are scratching their head feeling as though we're really not hearing a lot from state leadership in terms of what's going on, other than there's a lot of questions that are out there? And, you know, we interviewed the former auditor, Brian Sontag, recently, who said, listen, people have questions, we need to give them answers. Do you agree? Why not?
Well, I would hope that our former state auditor would go and look at our website to see how much work that we're doing, and to really see what boots on the ground are really doing here in Washington State. I've been the state auditor for 9 years now, and we do, like I said, 3,000 audits last year, and we put all that information out on our website in a user-friendly way. And I think that's important for any leader or any person that is interested in this topic to really contact the state auditor's office and see the work that we're doing, because we're putting it out there so that you can be informed as a citizen of Washington State of how your government is functioning. And that's the information that we provide, and I'm proud of that work. It's noble work.
Do you, can you share with us what happens if you do find fraud? What are the next steps?
Okay, well, if we found fraud within the agency, then we would do an investigation. If it required and founded what we believe is fraud in the agency, we would then, if it was a state agency, we would give that information to the AG's office, and they would do the criminal aspect. And they would follow the criminal charges for that individual. If it's a local government, then we would also follow the procedure of doing the investigation, give all of that money to local law enforcement and to the prosecutor's office in that local government. So that's kind of how the system works with regards to that. But we're not the only fraud investigators in the state of Washington. Like you said, DSHS has their own fraud investigative unit. The AG's office has their own fraud investigative unit. And so there are other entities that have investigators that look for fraud. Yeah. I mean, Washington State has 2 audit shops. We have my audit shop, which is the independent elected audit shop, and we also have an arm of the state legislature, which is our joint legislative audit committee, that also looks at performance auditing and issues of that nature, that can do a deeper dive with a performance audit as well.
What triggers that? Would if your audit raises a red flag, would it trigger that?
It could, or we would communicate our performance auditors, because we have performance auditors as well, would communicate with the legislative performance auditors, so we wouldn't duplicate work, but we would they would do an audit and then we would do another audit. And you can go out and look at all of our performance audits. We've done a deeper dive, and there'll be more that will come out. So when you get an opportunity to peruse our website, we'll make sure that you get to know. We opine, so we want you to be able to report that to the public.
Are you confident that your investigators, if there's fraud, will find it?
Well, many times fraud is really found within the agency themselves. Somebody sees something, they say something, and then they contact us, and then we do the investigation. Every now and then, we have an auditor that will actually determine that there is a fraud occurrence. One of our case studies that since I've been here was the Pierce County Housing Authority, where the finance director or manager was stealing up to $7 million and diverting that money, and that was found by an auditor in my shop.
Thank you for that. I want to ask you, just have a few more questions. What safeguards are in place to really ensure independence during the audit, particularly with a politically sensitive program?
Well, we operate in an independent, objective manner. It's not work that is partisan in nature. That's not the way we approach it. And quite frankly, we many times will have either one side of the aisle or the other ask us to do an audit. I want to look at this. Would you be willing and are you able to do an audit on this particular issue, like a performance audit, for example? Other than that, our financial audits are done on a regular basis. So that's not something that we pick and choose. We are going to do those audits.
When you do audits on various state agencies, as you said, all government is audited by this office. What do you recall about DCYF? What sort of grade do they get over the years, and how do they stand out amongst other agencies?
They are probably the most risky of all of the departments in state government, and that's something that I think they've made at least a concerted effort in my tenure here, of trying to reconcile that and to move it in a different direction. A lot of hardworking people in that agency. So I think it just means that they have to be able to give us that information so that we can verify that what they're doing is correct and it's meeting the requirements of the grant proposal, the federal dollars that they receive.
I think you spoke to this just a moment ago about, we've got some graphics that we think are helpful for folks to see. So it goes to my next question, which is audits can be very technical. So how does this office make sure that the public can consume it in sort of in a friendly way in terms of really understanding it?
Well, I've been in government for a long time. I was the Pierce County executive before this position, and I was a county auditor, and I was a school board member. So I've been in government a long time. I believe we do more good in government than we don't, but we don't tell our story very well. And that would include this office. And when I walked into this office, there's no way you could find a report on our website. It just was untenable. So one of the main things I wanted to accomplish is to really put our information, the public's information, whether you're a local government, a school district, a state agency, out on our website so that the public could see it. They provide us the information, we put it out on the website after we've done those audits. We're post-auditors, so we're coming in after the fact. How did you spend the money? What were your revenues? How did you spend those revenues? We work very hard in trying to make this website to be user-friendly. So you get to hover over over a comment that we may make in that audit speak to define what that means, so you can put it, so you can understand what that really means.
Okay.
We have a tool called the Financial Intelligence Tool. It's fabulous. You can do comparison. You can say, I want to compare my park district with a park district in a neighboring county. I want to see how my government, small government, is comparing to another government in another location. You know, port districts, take your pick. We put all that information out there, and when you get a glimpse of it, and we'll give you links so that you'll be able to provide that to the citizens of Washington State. We use social media to be able to inform people of the work that we do, and it's important work, and like I said, I believe it's noble.
I think that I may have just assumed that people know what an audit is.
I know, it's
right?
true.
And maybe I shouldn't make that assumption. Would you mind just please sort of outlining for us very specifically when it comes to DCYF what this audit is looking for and hopes to do?
What this audit will do is looking for the federal dollars that are received, because it's a grant. They receive a grant that provides subsidies for child care services. The state also provides money, but what we're looking for is, did they meet the requirements of the grant? And the grant, it can be very explicit. And we're looking to see down to the child level if they've met those requirements. And if we believe they haven't, then we opine on that. Then we elevate that. Then we shine a bright light on that, and then we let them know these are the areas that you need to improve if you're going to receive these grant dollars. So that's kind of, if I can put it in people speak, that's kind of what we do. We're doing a thorough financial examination of the funds that they're getting and determining whether they met the requirements of what the fund requires them to do.
And you had said earlier that of all the agencies, this is probably the riskiest one. And would you lean into that? What do you mean by that?
Well, it has had perpetual problems since its inception, I think. And part of it is the complexity, and part of it is the functionality, and I would say part of it could have been previous management. But I think it's a new day, and I feel confident that improvements are being made because I've engaged myself in it as well. How do we stop this from not being able to get this information? And they have leaned in, we've leaned in to make sure that that's the case. We want our governments to work. We want people to have confidence and trust in government, and they only are going to do that if we do the hard work. If we're not meeting the requirements of what a grant requires, then we need to say so, and we need to make the improvements to make those changes.
Okay, and then lastly, I just want to go back to one thing that we talked about earlier, and then we can wrap it up, is this, which I didn't know until I came here and spoke to you, so I'm so glad that you agreed to meet, is we weren't, the state, when I say we, the state, the auditor's office, was never up until this point able to drill down to the child care provider level until this current audit.
No, that is not exactly correct.
Okay.
Because of the audit that we did in 18 and 19, we were able to do that.
Okay.
But then they changed their accounting system after that.
Okay, so 2018 and 19, you were able to drill down. I know you prepared for me coming. Do you recall what came out of any of those audits in terms of the 20? You do? Okay.
Yeah.
And do you recall sort of the takeaway on that in terms of?
It was a lack of internal controls to be able to do all the verification that they needed to be able to do.
Okay.
You know,
Was
a
there
lot
any
of the
fraud
work
that came out of it that you recall?
No fraud.
Okay.
No.
Okay. And then so from 2020 to 2024,
Right.
the audit was not able. There was
To
no
verify.
Okay.
So that's the key word, I think, because we cannot verify if we don't have the data to be able to verify
And
it.
that was a function of they had changed their accounting system and it didn't allow for that.
For
And
us
you
to-
raised a red flag about it.
We
it sounds
did.
Like, and
We
said,
did.
This is not good. And
And
so
we
what was
did
happening?
again.
You were just beating on the drum there for the last like 4 years.
Yes, we were, but things are on the upswing, and so let's focus on where we are today.
And I get that. That it's a new day, and that now you are able to drill down. So it begs the question: what happened between 2020 and 2024?
Well, we still were auditing them on accountability audits. So we do a number of different kinds of audits, and so maybe that would be helpful for you to know.
Okay.
We do financial audits. This is the single-wide financial audit. This is the biggest audit we do in the state of Washington. Everyone has to comply with it. If you get federal dollars, if you get at least $700,000 or more in federal monies, you have to participate in this single-wide audit. And so anyways, but we do accountability audits. That's to see whether you're crossing your T's, dotting your I's, you have the internal controls in place to make sure that you don't have any internal fraud, not external. To get then there's a lot of nuances here. Sometimes you're talking external as your subrecipients. Those are the vendors who are providing those child care services. I'm talking about the agency itself. So we're looking at the controls in the agency itself. And then we opine on whether they are doing what they need to do. But I would go back to reading the reports because they give you a very thorough rendering of what those reports said.
But is it fair to say that between 2020 and 2024, nobody was really drilling down to see and following the money all the way from the funds the state receiving the funds and then the funds getting to the provider? Was anybody following that money trail?
I think DCYF is following to the degree that they can, but for us as an independent audit shop, we needed to have the ability to drill down to the child level.
Okay.
To verify.
Okay. And that's happening now.
Yes.
Okay. What else would you like to add that I haven't asked?
Oh, let's see. I would hope that the public knows that this independent office that does this body of work does it for every government in Washington State and does a thorough job. And I think that it's important and incumbent upon them that we take this work very seriously and we work with legislators, we work with governor offices. We work with both sides of the aisle, both houses, from a legislative point of view, and we work with local governments as well. We give them lots of tools, and how do you make sure that you're following all the rules and procedures, that you're using your purchase cards appropriately, that you're doing a segregation of duties so that the same person that's dealing with the money is not also collecting the money, for example. So there are a number of things that we're looking at with regards to how government finances are operating, and on those, you're going to hear that term a lot, internal controls. What are your internal controls? What are your checks and balances? Okay. That's what auditing is really tending to.
My apologies. I thought of one more thing. One more thing, and then I'm out of here. I want to know, there have been recent reports that DCYF is scrubbing some information from the website. Is this something that you're aware of, that concerns you, that is part of the audit?
I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
Is that coming on social media?
Well, I think that we have heard it from some lawmakers.
Oh, okay. Well, I would hearken to follow the facts.
We'll leave it there.